Welcome to the deep dive. Today, well, we're taking on a critical thinking challenge.
Hmm.
We're diving deep into one very powerful statement made recently that climate change is basically a con job, maybe a scam.
Right.
And we're going to weigh that single claim against, well, quite a stack of official scientific and medical sources.
And that specific claim, it came from Donald Trump, didn't it? During his UN speech just this September 2025.
That's the one.
So it really forces a question, are we looking at just one political viewpoint here? Or is it possible that the world's major scientific bodies, top government agencies, and frankly, the authors of over 100,000 research papers, are they all in on some massive global fraud?
It's quite the premise. So our mission today is just to, well, compare the evidence laid out in our sources.
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's maybe unpack this first by looking at the sources on causation, the actual physical science behind it all.
Yeah, the how do we know part.
Exactly. If this whole thing is a scam, these are the institutions, that supposedly built that fraudulent premise. NASA, for instance, they had an update late 2024.
Right, I saw that.
And they state pretty clearly that industrial activity, going back to 1750, has caused atmospheric CO2 to jump by almost 50%.
And what's really interesting, I think, is that the sources don't just stop at it went up. They offer specific, scientific proof linking it to us.
How so?
Well, NASA talks about identifying these unique isotope fingerprints in the CO2. Basically, scientific evidence showing the carbon comes from burning fossil fuels, not, natural cycles.
Isotope fingerprints.
That's
That's
right.
pretty specific. It sounds quite definitive from that source's perspective.
It does. And the EPA source backs this up too, right? Noting that human activity since the Industrial Revolution has, changed the climate fundamentally.
Okay. So based on these government agency sources, the question of human cause seems fairly settled by the data they present. But let's shift gears from the cause to the consequence. How does this actually affect people's lives, their health?
Yeah, that's crucial because the health angle, that's where these big climate shifts become, really personal. The CDC source from early 2024 said climate change doesn't just make existing health problems worse.
It creates new ones, too.
It creates new ones, exactly. We're talking about fundamental health security here.
And the sources get specific about what those threats are, right?
Or absolutely. The EPA, in that August 2025 update, links climate change directly to things like extreme weather. So more intense heat waves, floods, wildfires, things that cause immediate harm.
And for listeners maybe without a deep medical background, what does that cascade into?
Well, think about increased heat stress, which is really dangerous, especially for vulnerable people. And then there's the shift in where diseases pop up. We're seeing tick-borne and mosquito-borne illnesses spreading because warmer temperatures let them thrive in new areas. Plus, there's the mental health toll of dealing with disasters or, just the anxiety about the future.
Okay, so here's where it gets particularly challenging for the scam narrative. If it is a scam, then this huge institutional focus on the health threat, that has to be part of it too.
Right. We're not just talking government reports anymore.
No, we're talking top universities, major medical organizations pouring resources into this.
Exactly. Harvard, for instance, launched online courses just last summer, specifically on climate and health. Yale has a whole center dedicated to climate change and health.
The whole center, wow.
And maybe most significantly, the National Academy of Medicine, the NEM, they called climate change the most urgent global health threat of the 21st century. And that was back in 2020. They launched a grand challenge on it.
2020, so that shows a pretty long-term, deep institutional agreement. It's not just a recent thing.
And definitely not a flash in the pan. It suggests a solid consensus building over years within the medical and scientific establishment, according to these sources.
And then there's just the sheer volume of research that the scam assertion tries to dismiss. Over 100,000 papers on climate change in the National Library of Medicine alone.
100,000. It's hard to even grasp that number.
The number itself is almost a statement.
It really is. And that research, it's increasingly focused on making direct connections. Nature Climate Change, major journal, just reported this month, September 2025, on what they call attribution science.
Attribution science.
Yeah, it's the science that tries to specifically link human-caused climate change to measurable outcomes. Things like, and this is a quote, substantial death, disability, and disease.
Wow. So drawing very direct lines.
Very direct. And other recent papers in the NLM database point to things like the 1.5 degrees Celsius warming we've already seen since the early 20th century, and they linked climate shifts to worsening malnutrition globally, more infectious diseases, even factors that might increase cancer risk.
Okay. So Stepping back, what does this deep dive tell us looking at all these sources together?
Well, the picture they paint is pretty unified. It's consistent.
Yeah, from government bodies tracking CO2 isotopes right through to elite medical institutions mapping out disease risks. The message seems to be climate change is presented as real, it's human caused, and it's a serious health crisis.
So this exercise was really about weighing that massive body of evidence from multiple authoritative scientific sources against, well, a single powerful political claim.
And that leaves a final thought, really, for you, the listener.
hmm The source material implicitly frames these organizations, NASA, CDC, Harvard, NAM, as potential scam artists, if you accept the initial claim.
Which raises a really important question in today's world, flooded with information. How do you determine credibility?
Yeah, how do you weigh the credibility score of established institutions backed by, decades of research and thousands of scientists against the single amplified voice of a political figure?
What criteria do you personally use to tell the difference between a scientific consensus built on, let's say, 100,000 papers and a con job? Something to think about.